What would you dare to reach for if you could release judgment of yourself? What would you dare to envision, to dream, to work towards, to imagine if you could release that self judgment? Hello, and welcome back to the Business of Happiness podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Tarryn MacCarthy, and you guessed it, today is going to be a great day. Today, I bring to you this quote that has been singing to me all week, and I just wanted to throw it around with you a little bit today and see how you interpret it, see how it impacts you. You know, one of the things that I've been really paying attention to is judgment. And this quote by William James speaks so beautifully to it. He says, "A great many people think that they are thinking when they are merely rearranging their prejudices." Imagine that. Imagine that so much of what we think is really just rearranging old prejudices that we've kind of accepted as truth, as gospel. Prejudices of others, for sure, and prejudices of ourselves. How much of our thought process on a daily basis is simply swimming around prejudices and judgment? And when you start to pay attention, you realize, oh my gosh, quite a few. This past weekend, I was going for a run and we were visiting some family down in Connecticut. And what's fascinating about Connecticut is that I didn't realize along the shoreline, beaches are private. So there's only very small sections of beach. You can't just run freely on the beach, which I was so excited for and so looking forward to. Anyway, so I was running along streets in the neighborhoods and then dipping in to get closer and closer to the beach every time I could, just to get a little view of the water, which is absolutely my happy place. Anyway, I got to one point along my route when I was running back to the hotel we were staying in. And between the two roads was this narrow water that was feeding between the two roads. So you literally couldn't go across. You would have to run all the way back through the neighborhood, back out to the main road to get back to where you were coming from. And at this point, I had been pushing myself a little bit further than my cardiovascular strength is at this point. I'm just trying to regain some mileage here, friends. And so I was in no shape to run all the way back to the main road. I really could see where I needed to go. It was just this little river between me and the extension of the road in front of me. And I thought, the first thought I had was, oh my gosh, Taryn, you can't jump. You can't jump. You're not in enough shape to be able to jump over this narrow little riverbed. And plus, you're going to have to crawl down someone's retaining wall to do this. And oh my gosh, can you imagine what these people would think if they looked out of their window and saw a 45-year-old woman in a neon vest crawling down their retaining wall and leaping over the stream to get to the other side? You know, they're going to think I'm crazy and this is inappropriate to be, taking advantage of their space. And so I was giving myself so many limitations. Well, here's the thing. I stopped listening to my negative voice and I actually did it. I did. I hand over foot climbed down their retaining wall. It was made of concrete, it was perfectly stable. And then I jumped. I leapt over this little stream that was much wider than I thought I could do. And I got to the other side and then I climbed up the next retaining wall and I kept running along the road. I did it. I actually did it. But what I was so tempted to do was to listen to this limiting voice of judgment inside my own head. And, as I'm telling you the story, aren't you creating judgment of me too? Aren't you thinking, oh my God, how dare she crawl down someone's retaining wall? That's private property. I mean, listen to the judgment that we throw in here immediately. And trust me, this was burning in my brain as well. And I almost was daring myself to overcome my limitations. But do you see how these prejudices we have impact our happiness and our potential? So much limitation that we impose on ourselves simply by our self judgment. It reminded me of just a few weeks ago, I had this really sweet, beautiful patient in my chair. She was in her 60s and coming to the orthodontist. And she said, my teeth are crooked, but I don't want to seem vain. So, I'm wondering, is there any problem with my teeth being crooked? Can you tell me, is there something that is not functioning well, or are my teeth in danger? Are they going to get worse? That's another thing that I hear often from patients is, give me a greater reason to go forward with this, greater than I simply want it. It would make me feel great. The judgment overwhelms us sometimes beyond simply desire, simply just wanting to take care of yourself. We look for more reasons and more excuses to amplify, to support ourselves, when what we're really doing is laying enormous judgment on ourselves. Who am I to be doing this? What will other people think? If I said it was just because I want to feel good about my smile, will people judge me for being vain? Will people judge me for the amount of money I'm spending on myself? Will people judge me for wanting to smile with confidence? There's so much limitation. And it's fascinating because all that judgment is just inside of our own heads. And we return back to this quote: a great many people think they are thinking when they're merely just rearranging their prejudices. I love this idea of rearranging the prejudices, because any judgment that we hold against someone else really just gets rearranged back on us eventually. Isn't that true? Listen, I used to be the most judgmental person I know. And at the time, I didn't even know it. Here I thought I was so open and available and supportive of others, always understanding other people's perspectives. And when I started to pay attention and just become aware of all the judgment I was laying on other people, I shocked myself. I couldn't believe how much judgment I was actually imposing on others. And when I started noticing it, I thought, wow, if I could let that go, then I could let go of the same judgment on myself. Because what we do is we hold other people up to unreasonable expectations. And if I'm holding you to that unreasonable expectation, then I better hold myself to it as well. And that's when we start to feel the punishment of our own judgment on ourselves. You know, many of us are actually harsher on ourselves than we would be to anybody else that we know and love. We hold ourselves to expectations. This I see all the time in my incredible, incredible business owner friends. We expect ourselves never to take a day off, but we give them so willingly to our team members. We expect ourselves to be held accountable for every single action and word and statement and phrase and letter on our websites and on our written policies. And we're so forgiving when someone else makes a mistake. Once again, we're just rearranging those prejudices. Who are you holding such unreasonable, unattainable expectations to? Who are you expecting to be perfect when there is no such thing? There's another great quote I wanted to share with you, and that is from Gabby Bernstein's book, The Judgment Detox, which I highly recommend. It's an excellent book if you're just looking to kind of understand your own judgment a little bit better. And if you really are wanting to release yourself from all the judgment you put on yourself. And her quote is, when judgment is your belief system, you will always feel unsafe, under attack, and defensive. Hmm. So now I ask you, if feeling unsafe or under attack, or like you're always on the defense, is your go to state, could it be because of an underlying belief system of judgment? When we can rise above it and see that nothing is really that important, nothing is really that urgent, and really somebody else's decisions and choices is none of my business. There's another great saying that I love to remember as well is your opinion of me is none of my business. Hmm. We think that we can validate our own self-judgment by assuming that you'll have that judgment of us. It's that perpetual loop that keeps us so limited. I was telling myself before I jumped over that stream, so much holding so much judgment against myself. I was saying, "Taryn, you can't jump that far." Number 1, judgment of my ability. Number 2, judgment of my permission. What are they gonna say? What are somebody gonna say if they catch me? And did you notice when I was sharing my judgment with you, I even threw in my age as if that makes a difference. Some reason being 45 gives me less permission to crawl down someone's retaining wall. If you're listening to this podcast, chances are you didn't get into business to be miserable. The problem is that people feel that if their business gets busier, if they start becoming more successful, that happiness will eventually set in. But it can actually get worse. This is why I created the Business of Happiness Prosperity Coaching. In this one-on-one coaching, we look at how to redefine success on your terms and re-find the joy and the passion in your dream. Visit me at thebizofhappiness.com and become the happiest business owner you know. It's those judgments I'm just rearranging. I'm just using that same prejudice over and over again. If I saw someone 45 years old crawling down a retaining wall, apparently I would have judgment on them. Isn't that interesting? And you know what's the funniest snake bite in this scenario is when we start addressing and watching and becoming aware of the judgments that we have on others and on of ourselves, we start judging ourselves for it. Isn't that ridiculous? And so I ask you, as you entertain this idea and start listening to your language and paying attention to your thoughts, and you start hearing that judgment, oh, please be so kind to yourself, my friend, because it's so easy to get caught in the judgment loop and start beating ourselves up because of it, because that's what I did. Just as a warning, I am giving you fair warning of what the process that I went through. When I started reading Gabby Bernstein's book, when I started noticing how many times I was putting self limitations on myself simply because of a judgment that I had, I don't know, picked up somewhere or created in my own mind, I became very judgmental of myself. I started beating myself up. And that is the exact opposite of what we should be doing. So, a great workaround is when you start feeling that negativity because you realize, oh my gosh, I can't believe I harbored judgment right there. That's when you give yourself permission to grow from it. And you give yourself some saying like, wow, isn't that fascinating? Isn't that fascinating? I didn't know that about myself. Ha! Now I know. What you start to do is you use it as simply a data point. You know, several episodes ago, we were talking about failure as data points. Well, in a sense, this is kind of like a perceived failure as well, just accumulating data points of judgments that you were holding and then forgiving yourself for it. Geez, I didn't even realize, but now I do. Another place I like to go to immediately as soon as I start feeling the pain of self judgment is gratitude. Thank you for that terrible feeling. Thank you for that feeling that I had the minute I had the judgment, the limitation. Oh, that feeling is just an indicator like a little light on my dashboard saying, "You're judging." And instead of feeling badly about it, just giving yourself permission to be aware and to be grateful. Because as soon as we incorporate great gratitude, we can't feel the shame. It's almost like giving yourself permission to have a greater view, a greater understanding. You're pulling yourself off of that Titanic where they're just playing as the ship is sinking and you're getting a bigger, broader view. Oh, wow. Isn't that fascinating? I was judging myself again instead of now let me feel really bad about judging myself again. Or even when you're judging others. One of the greatest examples of judgment that's just so common in our society is when we use judgment to feel a little bit better about ourselves. When I'm feeling shame or I'm feeling negatively, I'm judging myself, then it feels a little bit better to judge someone else. It feels a little bit better to knock them down a notch. But that judgment is a two-edged sword. We always get burned ourselves. There's no world where when you're judging someone or a group of people or a friend or a situation, when you're judging it, there's no world where that comes without reciprocity, where that comes without equal judgment of yourself to yourself. That idea of simply rearranging prejudices happens in real time. It happens when you're judging someone, and it happens when you're judging yourself. And the interesting thing is, how many actions are we holding ourselves back from simply because of perceived judgment, because of perceived prejudice? How many of us are that 63-year-old woman in my chair who felt too embarrassed and judged to reach for straightening her teeth so that she could be proud of her smile? She was seeing her face and her smile more and more on Zoom calls and on FaceTimes with her children and her grandchildren. And she wanted to see her smile differently, but judging herself was not giving her permission to go forward with her dream. And so I ask you this: what would you dare to reach for if you could release judgment of yourself? What would you dare to envision, to dream, to work towards, to imagine if you could release that self judgment? How much of your day could you free up if you could release judgment of others? Could you, driving down the highway, someone cuts you off, not judge that person and just accept it as an experience and keep going? How much freedom would you gain in your day by releasing the judgment of that person, just letting it go? Your judgment will do nothing to change the situation. You were cut off. It's a fact. It happened in your day. Now you have a choice. You can rearrange your prejudices and find a reason to add judgment on that person who's already long gone. You can keep swimming in that judgment all the way to work, or you could let it go and enjoy the rest of the ride. And then if you noticed, oh, but I was about to judge that person because of their age, because of their color, because of their gender identity, if you catch yourself realizing, wow, I was about to judge him, can you forgive yourself? And can you lay off of the self judgment and bring yourself up to that higher understanding, your higher self, to be floating above the car and say, wow, Tarryn, you were just about to judge. Isn't that so interesting? And then let it go and not beat yourself up anymore. How much would you be willing to reach for in those moments where you just feel like, man, I'm overstretching myself and I they asked me to come to them and see them this weekend and I am exhausted. But how would they what would they think of me if I didn't show up? What would they say? How would they judge me? How would I judge myself? I really should be going. When you start hearing that language swimming and swimming inside of you, recognize all you're doing is rearranging that prejudice, just like those musicians on the Titanic rearranging their music stands, rearranging the furniture to keep playing as the Titanic was sinking. It's the same thing. We're rearranging those prejudices, trying to find a home where it will fit, where it will stick to make us feel a little bit better. So I ask you, if you could let go of those, if you could find awareness and then release them without judgment, how much better could your life be? Just driving to work, or even in dreaming of new possibilities, new opportunities for yourself. How much have you limited yourself because of preconceived notions of your age, your sex, your gender identity, your skin color, your height, your past experience, your past actions or inactions? How much are you limiting yourself because of an old prejudice that used to be? And what would you do if you could let that go? Oh, I love this conversation. I could keep talking about it for hours. I love thinking about it. And then I love trying to imagine a practice that releases all the self judgment when we do have the awareness. So when you start doing it, just remember you're not alone. I've felt that way so often, and I keep to this day, keep catching myself. Wow, Taryn, isn't that so fascinating? You were just beating yourself up over something that isn't a thing. Trying to just take myself a little bit less seriously. And let me tell you how greatly that impacts business. Within business, we do this so readily. We have so much justification for prejudice and judgment. We use it for marketing purposes. We use it for um, expectations of our business. For we tell ourselves it's so that we can get better and better at something. But asking yourself that critical question: Am I having this feeling or this decision? Am I making this decision out of a place of prejudice or out of a place of growth and compassion and excitement and intrigue and expertise? Am I doing this from a defensive place, or am I doing it from a place of enormous growth and possibility? That, my friend, is when you start to make real, empowered, inspired action, great impact on this world. And remember always, when you feel good, that's when you can do good. And until next time, have a fabulous weekend. Bye bye.